Hi everybody, today we're going to learn about JavaScript variables. An important part of programming is learning how you can save data, because by saving data you can reuse it and give your program this impression that it's kind of intelligent and knows the user really well. In JavaScript, data is stored in what we call variables, and it's very easy to use variables in your programming. The only important part is that you need to tell the computer very specifically, hey, I need you to save something for me. And this is how we do it. We start by using the keyword var, V-A-R. When you're using your editor, hopefully this will show up in some special color that indicates, ooh, this is a special word to the computer. Next, you need to give your variable a name. Now, I chose the name here, but you can imagine it being age, first name, last name, DOB for date of birth. The important thing is that it should be special to you, but not special to the computer. How does this work? When you declare a variable, you're basically telling the computer, let's stop talking in human talk and let's talk computer talk. So here, once you said var name, it reserved a space in memory. And it said, oh, okay, I know that I'm talking about position 11011, blah, 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 blah. But Colleen doesn't want to talk about those numbers. She wants to use the actual variable name. So whenever she talks about name, I know she actually wants me to use the value Christopher. There might be some variables that you've declared, such as age, that you haven't put anything in there yet. The important thing to know is that computers aren't smart. Computers are just trying to give you a way to avoid remembering big, long numbers and instead using English words. So when you come up with your variable name, there's a few rules that you need to follow. Every variable name can have letters, digits, underscores, and dollar signs in it. Now, to be honest, I don't put dollar signs in my JavaScript variable names because it can be very confusing, particularly for those people who know multiple programming languages. So I tend to stick to really just letters and sometimes digits and underscores. When you do come up with your variable name, even though numbers are allowed, your variable can't start with a number. That number has to be somewhere else in the middle or the end. Also, variables are case sensitive. What that means is that lowercase name is not the same thing as name with a capital N or name with a capital M or name in all capitals. To the computer, these are all different variables. So just be careful when you're programming and be consistent. Also, this last one isn't a rule so much as a suggestion that I want to convey to you. Make your variable names meaningful, or mnemonic is the computer science term we use. That means if the variable is storing somebody's name, call it name. If it's storing age, call it age. You could get away with calling it YYY or BBB. Just don't do it, okay? Taking a little bit of time to give meaningful names will save you a lot of heartache later. So, to be honest, if you're going to go to the trouble of declaring a variable and telling the computer to save a spot in memory for it, it's pretty silly if you don't then later use your variable. And what I mean by use it is you should assign some sort of value to it. When we assign things in computer science, we use what we call the equal or assignment operator. So it looks like an equal sign, but we call it assignment because what we're doing is we're not saying, hey, are these two things the same? We're saying, take the value and store it into the variable. So here I have var name, and instead of just leaving it at that, I go ahead and say, hey, I want you to store the name Colleen in there. Okay. So this is where, when we start talking about assignment statements, I refer to LHS and RHS. I mean left-hand side and right-hand side of statements. The left-hand side should always be the variable. All right, so this is going to be, in our case, name or some sort of element, something that we want to change. The right-hand side is going to be that new value that will be stored in the variable. Sometimes the right-hand side can be pretty long and complex. So right here would be an example where I'm just having, I declare my variable, and then later I want to update it. So I say name equals Colleen. This works really well. What I need people to avoid is doing something along this line, where they switch the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Mathematically, if you're a math major, this makes perfect sense and it's the same thing, but it's not okay in programming. Always put the variable on the left-hand side. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to show you a few examples of how you might use a variable. So if you remember when we talked about output, one way that we were able to produce output also was a way to generate input, and that was the prompt. So when you use the prompt, it's waiting for you to type something in, and when you type it in, it's going to store that into name. Now, we can reuse that whenever we want to. We can say document.write name, and it'll print out to the screen. Next, we can use another variable and say, hey, I want you to use this JavaScript function called date. And date is going to return what the current date and time is right now when you're looking at the page. Then you can write that information out. You can even use more from the API saying, you know what, I want to know where this window is. What's the location of this window? And you can write that out as well. So let's look at a quick example of how we can use that. So let's start with the simple code we used before when we were learning about prompts. Only now I want to combine it with a variable. So I'm going to go in here and do var, and I'm actually just going to call it nm. The reason I'm doing that instead of name is because I really want to make people realize that the name you give your variable doesn't really matter. It can be anything you want. Just because I call it name doesn't mean you have to. And as soon as I did this, the prompt statement showed up, and I put in Colleen. Great, it worked, but we didn't do anything with it. So let's go ahead and add a little bit more code. Now, I am going to comment out this line. You can see why, because otherwise it'll keep asking us to prompt things. So we'll comment that out when we're done. All right, so I have this variable called name. Now I can go ahead and do something on the lines of document.write nm. I can also do console.log nm. If you wanted to, you could even put in alert nm. All right, so let's go ahead and put this back in. Might want to edit all my typing out. All right. What is your name? Well, it is Colleen. All right, so the alert popped up, but why didn't the document.write work? So this is a good question, and this is actually an example where I can go in, that was going on. It was actually waiting for me to hit OK. When it was all done, it went in and it printed out my name. So this is a really simple, quick example. Let's do one that has a little bit more going on with it. Let's hit cancel right here. Stupid alerts keep popping up. That's why we want to get rid of them as soon as possible and switch to document.write. All right, so in this case, we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can add different things together and how you can assign your variables using more than just prompts. So in this case, I went in, I declared a variable. We're going to go ahead and ask for the name. I write out the name. I write out the name twice, actually. Once with my name and then another time with an H1 heading. And then I just wanted to show you that you can also grab other information from the document itself, such as the URL and the title. So first thing I'm going to show you is it says null and null. And that's kind of weird, and it might happen to you and it might not. So the first thing I wanted to print out was my name, but I didn't type anything in the prompt. So when JavaScript doesn't know what to do, when it doesn't know what value should have been in there, it's going to assign it a value of null. So let's run this one more time. I'm going to put in the name Christopher, just in case someone else named Christopher is watching this and they can feel special. And now you can see it printed out Christopher, it printed out the URL, and it also printed out the title of my page. Variables are a key component of really doing any type of programming language at all. We're going to be using them throughout this entire course, so I need you to practice them and feel comfortable using them. Go into the code that I have on CodePen or online and change it and see if what you do does what you expect it to do. You might create some errors, and that's okay. That's great practice using things such as console.log. The most important thing is I want you to understand how variables work so that you can use them throughout the rest of the course. Good luck.